the bigger changes on the East Coast, and because I'm a marine biologist, I'm going to focus on the marine components, but I'm also talking about marine for two other reasons. And one is that climate change really is a marine issue. Lots of other aspects of it, but it's all happening in the ocean. This graph here shows variation in heat content from around 1950 through to 2010. You can see the blue here is the increase in heat in the ocean, and this tiny little orange strip on the bottom there is the increase in the heat content in the land and the atmosphere. So the ocean actually absorbs around 80% of that additional heat that we trap in the atmosphere. If we didn't have the ocean doing that, we would be around 12 degrees warmer now than we are. So the ocean actually plays a really huge role in sucking up all that additional heat. And of course, because it's got such a large volume, the temperature's only gone up by a degree or two. But absolutely lots of marine climate change happening in the ocean. The other reason, of course, is that oceans and coasts are really important to Tassie, and in particular for the East Coast. So we know that sea country is really important for Indigenous Tasmanians, that we have that high rate of recreational fishing. My kids love fishing as well. Lots of people in Tassie love going out and having a fish. We produce the highest value of seafood nationally. Seafood's around a third of our agricultural production. We've got some amazing marine communities, but we also have warming that's around 4 times the global average off the East Coast. I'm going to show you a map now of this is rate of warming across the ocean, and these bits in orange here are global marine hotspots. Those regions in orange with the black outline are in the top 10% for rates of warming globally. And the east coast of Tasmania is one of those global marine hotspots. And if we think about why, it has to do with the East Australian current. So you're all familiar with that, I'm sure. Pushes down the east coast in summer, retreats in winter. That current is now 350 kilometres further south than it was 70 years ago. So the kind of marine environment we have off here now is more or less what was off the New South Wales-Victorian border around 70 years ago. So it's a big change in a relatively short period of time. That current is pushing further down the coast because of warming of the atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean. So as the atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean's gotten warmer, the wind field, or the gyre sitting over the Pacific Ocean, is literally speeding up and getting stronger, and it's physically forcing that current down the coast to be much stronger. So we get a double whammy off the east coast. We get the underlying warming that most of the rest of the ocean gets, and we have that change in the current system. So that's why we have things like a lot of new species turning up, and I'll show you some of those. But it's a project called REDMAP, or the Range Extension Database and Mapping Project, where fishers and divers, particularly on the east coast of Tasmania, that's been a real stronghold for the project, have sent in photographs of species that they think or know are unusual for that area. We get every single one of those sightings checked out by a scientist, by an expert for that species, that says, yes, it is unusual, it isn't, it is the right species name. And then we pop it up on the website, so you can log on to REDMAP and see what new things are coming up off the east coast of Tasmania. But lots of observations, so this is 40 around here, 18 here, 44 up there, lots of new species turning up.
So it's for all of Australia?
Yes, REDMAP operates all around Australia now, but I've just shown the Tasmanian part of it. We started it in Tassie because fishers were actually telling me about snapper that they were getting off the north coast, and we've had snapper intermittently for decades, even off the further down the east coast. But lots of reports of snapper on the east coast, on the north coast. Being an ecologist, I wanted to look at how they were fitting into the ecosystem, what they were eating, where they were coming from. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make a project that actually records the observations of people that are out on the water and see these things. So that's how the project started in Tassie. and now it operates all around Australia. And it's been really useful information. So we've been able to get such a good idea, like an early indication of how things are changing from all these observations that come in, and then we sort of develop more in-depth studies around all those things. But some of the things that we've seen, obviously the urchin, everyone knows the evil urchin. We've had new octopus species. This is the gloomy octopus, usually in New South Wales. That's now 13% of the octopus fishery on the north coast of Tasmania, and it wasn't recorded there before 2005. We've actually had a genetic study, really thorough genetic study done on that species that reinforced the suggestion that that had been a really rapid recent range extension into that area. We've got around 50% of those little intertidal species, all different kinds of species, have moved further south. Dozens of new fish species, and of course some of these fish species we'd get, you know, a couple in one year, a couple in another, over you know, decades. So not all of them are new, but we're certainly seeing many more of them and staying for longer. So they're around in higher abundances and becoming more permanent. And around 85% of the seaweeds as well are also found much further south from 1940. So a whole range of different species turning up and starting to become resident off the east coast. And of course some not very welcome things as well, like the toxic algal bloom that we had in 2016, closed down harvesting for a lot of the fisheries, and was, you know, not a great thing to happen for the coast. And we're starting to see many more toxic blooms and different strains of things that weren't around before or weren't a problem. So they might have been in a dormant phase, and now as the temperatures warm up, we're starting to see more of them. But if you take a step back and have a look at what the east coast looked like before warming, so this is kind of what I saw in the mid-90s when I started diving off mainly around Great Oyster Bay, and now we have a pretty different system. So we're getting yellow-bellied sea snakes turning up, we have more harmful algal blooms, we have, you know, eastern rock lobsters. There was a den of almost 40 eastern rock lobsters off St Helens, reported a couple of years ago, I think. All different sized eastern rock lobsters living in a den. I don't know how they all found each other, that perplexes me. But you know, it's quite a different system now. Obviously that picture's made to look quite dramatic. It puts everything all in the one picture. But I think it is a very different ecosystem now when I go diving. And most people that have been out on the water would you know, probably agree with that as well. So some big changes off the east coast. Some of those have been turned into opportunities or partial opportunities. The urchin fishery, for example, one way of trying to harvest the urchin to try and alleviate some of those issues. Recreational fishers are pretty happy with snapper and yellowtail kingfish that have come down. So I think it's a big change, but it's obviously a mixed bag. Some things we won't notice at all. Some things are probably good, and then some changes that are not very good at all. So I'll leave that one there, and Pete's going to talk about food